Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Burn. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined today by a great progressive running in the great state of Florida, 21st District to be specific, Mr. Guido Weiss. How you doing, Guido?
Hey, excellent, Eric. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thanks for taking some time to chat with me about your campaign, your background, your platform, sort of the corruption of your opponents, if you will. I'm going to just say it straight out of the gate.
Thank you.
Yeah. I love your website. I want to pull it up as we go a little bit, but you use the word bribe on your website. Home run, don't see that very often. So kudos on that. So just jump into the beginning. Can you give a little bit about, just kind of a thumbnail about your background and why you decided to run?
Oh, absolutely. So from Palm Beach County, Florida, got 4 generations of family here. And this was not my kind of what I thought I would be doing in life. I ended up in Washington, D.C. after getting out of some Navy Reserve training. And I ended up on the Hill. It was the first job that took me 4 years ago in Congress. I started off as a mid-level staffer, ended up as a senior staffer very quickly for Tulsi Gabbard. And I was watching my hometown representation here in Palm Beach County, and I start to get more critical and understand how the sausage is made a bit more after working there. And I was able to pass a lot of different policy measures. But I start following Lois Frankel, who represents my family and me and the community I grew up in, and I see claiming to be an environmentalist while taking money from the biggest polluting companies in the district that are causing algae blooms and terrible for global warming, big massive burns of crop yields, and just kind of the worst type of Monsanto type large scale agriculture. And also saying, I'm an environmentalist fighting climate change. And that was really upsetting. Or, when you see members of Congress write press releases home acting as if they just saved the world every single time they went back to Washington, D.C., when your staff are sitting there in the committee, they did almost nothing or very frequently nothing. And it was too much to bear watching our community not be represented well. So I said, you know what, I'm going for it. I've been able to write a lot of great policy. I've got a lot of experience in the community. I understand the diversity of our community. And one more step forward is I saw how bad corporate money influences every single decision in Congress. And I liken it to corruption. It really is. It's some bizarre form of legalized bribery. And I don't want that to be how my community is represented at all.
Right on. Yeah, and it's a funny thing because there's this expectation that sort of all Republicans are corrupt and accept the bribes. But if someone has a D next to their name, they're a good guy, right? There's this sort of casual. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, oh yeah. So I saw that you had Sheila Sherfilis McCormick on. And we have come to the realization here in South Florida, there's 4 candidates running. I'm not sure if she mentioned it. We've kind of formed a block together. And, Sheila Sherfilis McCormick, Jen Perlman, Christina Levo in the races with Federica Wilson, Alcee Hastings, and Deborah Wasserman Schultz. Because many of these Democrats in office that are just, it's kind of bizarre that they even call themselves Democrats when you see how corporate they are and how they're influenced by Wall Street. But they'll use the talking points when they're back in the district, Wall Street this, Pharma this, but they're really hand in hand with these companies and these people. And I think the people here in Palm Beach County and across the country have really appreciated what some elsewhere. I have to say, we are following what others have done and have really been able to make a difference to pave the way for people like us to say, you know what, we can take on incumbent Democrats that have millions of dollars in their campaign accounts. We can do this. We've seen it across the country. And people do want, I think people at their core, when we talk to them about these issues, understand that it's bad, how money influences politics and how frequently, I call it silence money. When they have the opportunity to, if you're going to talk about lowering healthcare costs, you have the opportunity to introduce amendments at so many different, levels every single year in Congress, and they just don't do that. They sit on their hands. They don't do anything. They go along with the party's, big bill measures and report back home as if everything was that, their effort. So I think we're really getting to a point where there's a turning point.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope you're right. I feel that momentum too. Certainly, a lot of people kicked off with Bernie's campaign in 2016, and the continuity is just built, with, the 2018 House seats and hopefully more this cycle. So, I feel you on that. How about your background? I understand you went to university, got your master's in international studies.
Yep.
Talk about.
So I went to American University in DC. I started off in South Carolina, actually, which is interesting. And that was, I was so funny as somebody from South Florida, realizing when I was 18 that I didn't actually live in the South. Being from kind of the metropolitan Palm Beach County, Broward, Miami-Dade area, realizing that I live in the geographic South, but I don't live in the South. And that was an interesting experience. Then I went to DC. Ended up also moving, studied in Israel, studied in Jordan, studied in Russia. So foreign languages are a big part of my life passion. Really influential on me, just studying foreign languages and being able to connect with people on a different kind of level. The other part about background that I talk about, and this is not the thing I'm running on, is I'm also a Navy officer. I was formerly enlisted. I enlisted in 2015. Ended up doing some interesting work in the DMV area when I was a congressional staffer. I was actually a military, at one point, with the version of a military police officer in the Navy. They call them Master at Arms. And I was talking to some people when we were at some of the Black Lives Matter gatherings and protests, and I was telling them how, in the Navy security force, I was trained to do exactly not what they did to George Floyd. And it really changed my perspective on law enforcement to kind of have some training in military law enforcement. And then I commissioned as an officer last year. Actually, Congresswoman Gabbard was my commissioning officer.
Wonderful. Obviously you're running on sort of an uncorrupted, no corporate PAC campaign, right? But there are instances, particularly when writing legislation, where you might have to, negotiate or drop some principles, or, however you might want to frame that. What did you learn about that specifically while working in Representative Gabbard's office?
So one of the bigger lessons I learned about Congress working for Tulsi Gabbard, was she gave me the lateral and the trust to write, I mean, 30, 40, 50 provisions for her. I was trusted by her. And a lot of those provisions, they weren't national level. And I'm all for, and I'm very much pushing for some of these bigger items that we discussed, and I'm sure we're going to get into. But through the amendment process, which many members of Congress they don't even engage on it. They're doing other things. But we were able to get, things. We were able to increase the amount an Indigenous Native Hawaiian contractors able to get from the federal government from 22 million to 100 million. And almost nobody knows about that. And that's huge for the Indigenous community. Another thing I learned about in terms of a member of Congress's votes, I think, is like 20 or 30% of the actual job they were doing up there. The amount of things that you were able to do, like, if an agency is doing something locally or not taking into consideration the Native community or another community with their environmental impact study, you can really put pressure on them through congressional letters and congressional diplomacy. And that was a big lesson as well. Just the amount of things that an active member of Congress can do who has the good intentions to impact real people's lives on the ground. And let me know if that was a good answer to your question, because I think I might have gone in a different direction. So if you want to go back
No, that's great. You kind of underscored it a little bit in a way, because you mentioned a lot of the Congress members don't take advantage of that amendment process. It's because they're not paid to, right? Yep. So they're basically rubber stamping legislation written by donors or whatever. So amendment, they're not even interested. It's not even their purview.
Absolutely. And the other thing, the appropriations process, many members of Congress don't get that involved in it. And one thing that I also like to point out to people here in the district, and they say, well, what is you going to Congress going to do for minimum wage or Medicare for all, or you name it? And I tell them, once we have a critical mass, and we've already seen this from the 2018 progressives that got in, the whole conversation has changed. And you continue to see somebody like Joe Biden coming in different directions that we never expected him to do, because now because people have put faith in non-corporate Democrats and others that are kind of not falling into that line, I believe, and that we are going to slowly get at, not slowly, but I think that we're expeditiously getting at some of these policy items that people called myths 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Right on. Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at your district just geographically. So it's Florida 21st, Delray Beach, Palm Beach, South Palm Beach. Like you mentioned, I had Sheila on yesterday with these sort of ridiculously gerrymandered by race areas, but you're the district, along the coast east of hers, I suppose. What do you want to say about the district and sort of the constituency?
Oh, so I just have to mention Sheila's as well. I mean, her district is really wild to see on a map, to see a district that is that gerrymandered. It's just, I'm so glad that you put her map up just so viewers can see how politics can work in Florida. One thing about my district that people might know right away or might not know is that Mar-a-Lago's in there. So I am, and to some extent, running to be the president's member of Congress. We have a very diverse district. It's like around 20 to 25% Latino, depending on how, or of Hispanic background, depending on how what data you're looking at. Between 14 and 18% of a Black background. A lot of Caribbean people, a significant Jewish population, a lot of veterans, 90 to potentially up to 90,000 veterans in that district. But you have an interesting, you kind of have the richest place in the country, or one of them, Mar-a-Lago, Palm Beach Island, as well as significant portions that are working class Americans and immigrants that are really, really struggling. And right now in Palm Beach County, if you have one child, our Florida state minimum wage, you are 100%, at least according to MIT, you are in poverty. So to have that contrast is really drastic, and it means a lot to a member of Congress. And it's also, just, I didn't mention it in the beginning, a big reason why I'm running, because you have somebody like Lois Frankel, who loves going to Palm Beach Island, loves going to Boca Raton, doesn't go to many communities in between. And you can see that from just an easy skim of where she's been the past few years. The last thing that's, I'll note that's really notable about our district is we're between the Everglades reserves and the ocean. Yeah. And so those, what big agriculture does, what sea level rise does, what chemical runoff does, hurricanes really affects us in a way that I wish that honestly, I'm hoping to be more lean forward on environmental issues than anybody's ever represented it, because for everybody it's been a secondary or non-issue.
Yeah. And you mentioned big agriculture. Is that big sugar? Big sugar is a big thing. Is that your?
That is big sugar. That is big sugar. We have, it's one of the biggest industries in Florida. They fund politicians from the commissioner and city level all the way up to state senate, state house, mayor, U.S. rep, Marco Rubio. Everybody takes big sugar money. And Frankel is one of the bigger big sugar acceptors. You've got a few families that are either they're billionaires or they're very close, and they have a huge influential role in our politics here. Another thing about them is that the internet has built us a situation where it's easy we're able to get information out to people now. Before, they were known to have a very tight grip on media, whether it's through advertising or just other types of pressure. And now the internet has helped proliferate some of the awareness to the harm. So, for example, there's reports that show that 50% of our coral reef is away not because of sea level or sea temperature rises, but because of phosphorus runoff.
And do people in the district generally have awareness of this?
It's growing. It's for sure growing, and we have we are bringing awareness to it. A lot of people who do, it's kind of a disconnect. A lot of people who do have awareness of it do not have an awareness that their members of Congress are involved in this, what's going on. So, it wasn't even until a year of me being on Capitol Hill as a staffer, because I just worked on policy. I didn't work in politics. And it wasn't until I started working and getting an understanding of the political, how FEC works and how to look up your member of Congress and where they're getting money from, that I started to understand. So when I tell people, there's a reason why we were endorsed by the Democratic Environmental Caucus, when the Democrats writ large try to ignore that this campaign even exists, or Jen Perlman, or any of the other progressive candidates running in South Florida or West Coast. And I also have to say, Jesse Philippe on the West Coast, he's been doing great things, Marine Corps veteran. Big Sugar has a big role.
Yeah, no doubt. So I mentioned it earlier, and since you just talked about Big Sugar and her donors, so this is your website, and you have a pretty a pretty detailed sort of description of specifically where she's gotten her money, how it's impacted her votes, like you just said about FEC filings. You're specifically emphasizing where Lois Frankel's bribes come from, and I think that's a fantastic thing. People are, like I said at the top, people tend to be hesitant to use that direct language, but you're spelling it all out here. So kudos for that. Do you want to comment on this?
Oh yeah, I mean, so another one, Ocasio-Cortez, she mentioned, Crowley's never in the district, or Crowley's office was in the district, I believe. Frankel's office is outside of the district, in a building connected to a donor, in a building that's not accessible, in a building that, it's just, this is the what's going on here with our style of politics. And that's why, we're open, at the minimum, win or don't win, we're opening up a serious conversation about what's right and what's wrong. And in terms of our campaign and the Democratic Party, there's been intimidation to us. And it's not just me, it's all of the other progressive candidates in the state of Florida. We've thankfully kind of formed a bond in a unit. And, we were told, and with very aggressive language at the first Democratic Club, when I was just going to introduce myself as a candidate, to let them know I was running in a very respectful way. They got very aggressive. And we've had all types of things like that, and or trying to, if somebody offers a forum to us, they'll get flack from the Democratic Party or something. And I'm a Democrat. I'm just not taking corporate money, and I'm talking about different issues, or the same issues from a different perspective.
Yeah. So there's that sort of bribed obstruction, right? And I'm glad that you mentioned that too. Let's just talk about a little bit of what you're fighting for, right? Obviously, Green New Deal, Medicare for all the sort of linchpin progressive policies.
Yep.
Can you talk about how they specifically? And I want to ask you, you have Older American Bill of Rights. I want to ask about that specifically, but let's just tick off a few of them and how they pertain to your district specifically. So let's talk about Green New Deal in Florida 21. How would that impact your constituency?
So Green New Deal in Florida 21. Right now, we have a state government that, and we have a not a very good public transit system. We are mostly a suburban car-to-car, area-to-area, even though we have the capability, and there have been models out there that show, we could do this, that, and the other with not even huge investment to improve the public transit in our district in Palm Beach County. But there's a lot of efforts to not do that and just focus on expanding roads, taking away more Everglades, this, that, and the other, which we've seen all over developing places. The Green New Deal, as I mentioned, we're between the Everglades and the Atlantic Ocean. We have the Gulf Stream. It's a beautiful, really beautiful area. We will be impacted by climate change in a way that is disproportionate to other parts of the country, at least in terms of sea level rise. Maybe not some of the other effects. And I can't speak to what Appalachia and Colorado are going to have in terms of what 5 degrees does for them. But for us in sea level rise, we are in many ways, in many communities, barely above sea level, especially the low income communities. If a nice brand new residential neighborhood down here, they mandatory build like 12 to 19 feet little berms. You can barely tell because it's just a house on a small rising, but they're a little safer. Those gated communities are a little safer. But these other communities, and it might not be the people who are living them now. It might be their grandchildren or them. In 20, 30 years, or maybe sooner than that, we're already seeing a lot of things. And that's going to disproportionately affect our community. And I think that we need to be at the forefront of that because of these situations. On top of that, I really, I've spoken with a few different environmental groups down here, and they will tell you over and over again, we have the ability, we have the sunshine, we have the resources we're the perfect area to go to renewables in many ways. We have wind for wind power. We've got the sunshine for the really good quality around sunshine for solar, and we can implement in a way that I think is going to do well for us.
Yeah. Lois Frankel takes fossil fuel money. Does Big Sugar, do they push back on the Green New Deal? That would that adversely? What's their position on that?
So let's talk about releasing carbon into the atmosphere. Big Sugar has big burns every year, and I'm sure that if we try to take away, that's cheap. It's cheap, it's easy, and the communities right next to those big burns most of them are minority communities, and they even call it, I think it's called gray snow. It just goes on their houses, and they have a lower life expectancy than other people. It's in a little bit west of my district, but we're all South Florida, and I think some of the people that live in like the suburban center area of Palm Beach County just forget that there's this rural community that needs help so bad. So the Big Sugar, I haven't necessarily called them up to ask, but I'm sure that they would be very upset if you say you can't burn anymore. You need a more sustainable agriculture model that we know. This is the thing with a lot of these issues. We know how to do it. We've seen models around the world where instead of burning, they use other ways to recycle their crop. Instead of having crop fields the size of a small country, you cut it up and diversify, and you change how which fields you use in certain, maybe you give a field a year or two off. And like there's ways to do things in a more sustainable way that I'm not an ag expert, but I know it exists. And I'm pushing us in that direction. And there's definitely an awareness to it. And I'm just trying to bridge that gap. So people who are putting policymakers into power, I don't even call it power, into that position, are making the decision knowing that what corporate money does to go counter to what they think. And I'll just say, there are a lot of Democratic environmentalists who don't want to hear that. They don't want to listen to it. They might know Frankel from, she was my mayor in West Palm Beach, but they don't want to hear it. They say, you know what, every Democrat does it. I mean, I think it was Walmart that sponsored the Democratic convention earlier in the year. Like huge companies that, anyways.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah. Yeah. There was that clip a few years ago about Barney Frank saying, should we just let them take all the money? Like it's obscene. So how about Medicare for all? And, I want to frame it, I imagine there's a lot of older residents in your district. So there's long-term care, there's, lowering the Medicare age in Medicare for all, there's prescription drugs. Can you talk about the benefits of Medicare for all for, Florida 21?
Oh yeah. So Medicare for all, and I'll talk about some of the seniors, the older Americans that you mentioned. One thing that I just have to say is I've been at a lot of social justice related protests. My campaign, we're doing everything we can to support. We're trying really hard not to be the leader because we're letting people within their communities, we want people, we want to just encourage that and be positive and help however we can, lending resources and this, that, and the other. And I try to, and I'm framing it to people as this uplifts so many people if we make it happen. And we were discussing, bringing up the point of the average Black household being 1/10 the wealth of the average white household in this country, and how Medicare for all can really benefit everybody across the society, a lot of the seniors in our district, one of the points of Medicare for All that I like the most is, just going in that direction, is lowering prescription drug prices. And I was fortunate enough to live in a couple different countries for a few different reasons, where I've bought drugs there that cost $100 here for $7, $10, $13. I remember living in Russia and buying a generic version of, I can't even remember what it was that I bought here. And it was so much cheaper. Not because it was bad quality. It was fine. It was because it was, they didn't have the same institutional structure here that discriminates against improving the prices of drugs. So that's the one thing that I really, really try to talk about with the seniors in our community, is some of the concepts that Bernie Sanders put out about pegging U.S. drug prices, Medicare negotiating with drug companies. All of those, I think, will impact our community here in a very serious way. Also expanding, Bernie talked about expanding coverage to things that aren't currently covered, like vision and I believe dental as well.
Yeah. Didn't you love every time he mentioned that, he would always go, he would always point eyeglasses, hearing aids, and every single time he would point to himself.
It's great.
Yeah, like even Canada doesn't have dental as part of their plan, right? So it would even be better than the current Canadian system. How about specifically? Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing I like to point out to people is the amount of places that are able to do something similar that are in much better financial situations as an institution with their government than we are. Those talking points trickle down even within the more senior Democratic community. We can't afford it. But I try to point that out and just really try to provide proof. And anytime somebody asks for something, I send them reports and stuff.
Yeah. I'm assuming Lois Frankel is not signed on to John Paul's bill or anything. I didn't.
So she signed on after 3, I think on her fourth term, I think the 116th Congress, she signed on. And since we have been running, all of a sudden it's on her website. It was kind of funny. We are a $20,000 campaign going against $1.2 million. It's wild, but we have a lot more people. We definitely have the people. She's got really high paid consulting firms, but we have the people. All of a sudden her website it's got new medical, her healthcare section has changed. I keep getting text messages from people, and basically she's copying a lot of, she's all of a sudden running on progressive ideas. In terms of the environment, and she's starting to talk about Medicare for All and things like that. So, if we didn't win, we push somebody in that direction, I think we're going to win.
Yeah, I think so too, and that would disappear immediately after the election if she did, right? Yeah. So,
by the way, I apologize. I've got dogs in the background going a little wild.
No worries. So there is the Older American Bill of Rights that you mentioned on your website. What is that? Can you describe that?
So it's outlining. So here in South Florida, we've had our older residents have been constantly in a disadvantaged position, especially those people don't realize it all the time, that you have a lot of impoverished older Americans. Even if they're in some community, frequently these communities, the homes are very inexpensive, and they live completely on their Social Security and their Medicaid, and maybe some of them have veteran status, but there are a lot of people impoverished. Not only that, there are a lot of people who have been frauded by various institutions. So there are a lot of people that have been mistreated by skilled nursing, or what they thought was a good skilled nurse who has mistreated them. And these stories, if you grow up in South Florida, are something that you hear over and over again. And that's why it's really important to me to show them that there's an effort to create a kind of a structure for what people who are retired, who might not have the same family network or even income to provide themselves protections. So it's a whole effort to like really increase awareness of the protections that they need, and efforts to let them know, these are things that I will, as your member of Congress, work to create statute and on. And when we're talking about budgets and things like that, I will absolutely be somebody to support the budgets for skilled nursing and Medicare for all, and things like that. Now, it does mention, Medicaid and Medicare and expansion of both of those, but my real point is we're getting towards Medicare for all. In the meantime, I'm not attacking those other programs that are in existence.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You don't see that talked about nearly enough. So that's definitely a good thing. Your dog's going nuts there.
Yeah, sorry. My wife is actually going to go try to mitigate that situation.
No worries. Well, before we go, just a couple more things. So can you give give me like another example of a direct connection between a corporate donor to Frankel to a vote that negatively affects the people of Florida 21?
So let's go with military and defense budget. Now, I'm a Navy sailor. I'm part of the that institution on a reserve capacity. But when it comes to making policy, I'm one that is really well aware that the DoD budget is over 50% of our discretionary budget, and like some other countries, they add their Homeland Security and veterans budget together, and then all of a sudden it becomes like 66% of our discretionary budget. And you've got someone like Lois Frankel, who is the ultimate, before I was running, she had 3 issues on her website, and it was like you could on her campaign website, and it was very minimal. And she's the ultimate representative that goes to a dovish community and says, we need more domestic spending. All this war is bad. Let's get out of Afghanistan, but always votes for increasing the Defense Department budget. And there was one vote in particular that I think it was an aircraft carrier, and it was an aircraft carrier that the Navy didn't even want, but industry wanted. And when I was a staffer on worked with the Armed Services Committee on the National Defense Authorization Act, and I remember being a staffer, and this is really when I started to get involved in wanting campaign finance reform. I was looking at the top Democrat and top Republican on the Armed Services Committee, who had both taken over $200,000 from defense industry money in that cycle. And they're the ones who are really the architects behind the defense bill that we all vote on and passes. Not me, but passes every year for 59 years straight. And when I saw that vote with Frankel pushing for a multi-billion-dollar piece of equipment that the institution at hand wasn't even that interested in, because when I was a congressional staffer, they called them MLAs. For a year or so, I was an MLA, a military legislative assistant. You get all these industry money, Raytheon's hitting you up, and Boeing, and Ingal, and it's called Electric Boat, who makes our submarines. And they come in there, and sometimes they come in there with a member of Congress from like 4 years ago. They'll literally show up as you're a staffer, and you've got a member of Congress who was like an 8-year member or something like that. And they're like, hey, Guido, what's going on? And it's like really seeing that process is eye-opening. It's like you are using a member of Congress, you're probably paying them $500,000 a year to come in here and try to intimidate, staffers who on the House side, because they're underpaid, because industry wants to keep them underpaid, staffers on the House side in particular make between $30,000 and $60,000, when their federal government counterparts are making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000, $120,000. And a lot of staffers are aware that there are efforts by industry to keep low-paid staffers in and not raise staff salaries, because it really changes the amount. If you had a bunch of people that were, had been staffers for their entire career because they're that trained up, that would be fantastic. But unfortunately, you don't always have that, because there's salary discrimination. So anyways, going back to the full circle, Lois Frankel is very influenced by defense industry. I've seen Lois Frankel constantly raise a budget and then talks about we need to increase defense, domestic spending on healthcare and infrastructure and environmental and this, that, and the other, but not really taking a stand when the time comes down to it. And that's me trying to be succinct to something I could talk days about.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting that you shared that about the staffer. So when you going back to when you worked in Tulsi Gabbard's office, if you're underpaid and you come and you get this pressure, it's not a direct bribe, but it's hey, you've got a career path ahead of you, right? And they bring in, like you said, someone that the face of, right?
So one thing that I'll say about working in Tulsi Gabbard's office was she did not care what defense industry knocked on her door. I dealt with her and her alone in Hawaii and a lot of progressive members of Congress when we were putting our amendments through. I didn't, and the staff and the institutions at hand, but we didn't take. I've literally seen these defense companies write a letter or an amendment, and they literally just write it and give it to you. They send it to your email, and then they email your boss's political person, and then they max out their donation, and it's like an amendment the next day.
Wow.
And that wasn't the case in Gabbard's office, but it was frequently the case in the other offices I dealt with on the committee, because it's one of the biggest committees in Congress, and it's Democrat and Republican. So you can see these amendments, and say there's an amendment to create, put 33 submarines instead of the 32 the Navy requested for the next 30 years or whatever, because each submarine's billions of dollars at the end of the day, or hundreds of millions. I can probably tell you which company wrote that, or which company got a meeting with the member of Congress and said we need that, and then they go on the floor, and all of a sudden the member of Congress is an expert on China, and they're the all-knowing expert that basically tries to say, if you don't support this, you're not patriotic, and you just want to diminish our place in the world.
Right. Yeah, that's terrible, and that leads us to Space Force too, right? That
the Steve Carell movie.
Right. They just opened up a whole other market for the military industrial complex to, get contracts and whatnot. Right.
Yep.
And I'm assuming Lois Rankel voted for that as part of the last budget, I would think.
She votes to increase. It's always an increase. And it's never like a strong principled stance of, we shouldn't be doing this. And like, that's one thing that I am going to offer the district is, do we actually need this? Well, who's making us do this? Why is this vote on the floor right now? And just an understanding I think coming in from a former staffer perspective helps a lot with that. Being the person who was pressured, I've had members of Congress somehow get my personal cell phone, former members of Congress, and just start calling me, asking me about, trying to get your boss to do this, that, and the other.
Wow. That'll be a whole other episode. Once you get elected, I want to talk to you about that. That's amazing. So I want to just pull up, some other policies. You mentioned fighting human trafficking and social justice. We kind of hit on, women's rights, student debt relief. Any of these others that you want to kind of delve into quickly?
I have to mention student debt relief. I know that at one point in Lois's career, she was supporting the private universities when they were lobbying. I am a product of that, giant debt that you incur as a student in the United States. I'm also a product of a student who got a degree overseas and realized you can get just a phenomenal education for a tenth of the cost. And I really feel for these, I think these, well, not even young, all ages of American citizens that are just stuck with, really mortgage size student debt for wanting their education. And I continue to look at places that, their government has a much better financial outlay, and they have free to low cost education. So I really do believe we need a restart. And I do think that my district and our country will benefit tremendously from that. It really is one of the more challenging, pressing issues for just, I think, these generations to flourish. And a lot of that, it comes back to campaign influence. Gun safety. I was talking to, I got the Moms Demand Action Gun Sense Candidate distinction. And I was telling a group of people, I said, this is all great. And I really appreciate them for giving me that distinction. But the bills that the Democrats passed through the House are likely not going anywhere, or they will be very watered down on gun safety until you can get corporate influence out of politics. Because the money that goes to even, Democrats, but mostly Republicans at this point, related to weapons, if you take a background check and turn it from 3 days to 30 days, they might forecast a 2% drop in sales, which would be hundreds of millions of dollars for them, or tens of millions. And it's all business in that sense. So we really need to, all of these issues, every single one of them comes back to campaign finance. And that's what the message that I want to bring, as always, to every group is like every single one of these issues, from LGBT to social justice and Social Security, teachers and education, you can in some way refer it back to campaign finance and why we haven't made progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me. Your election day is August 18th. I haven't mentioned that yet. I've been remiss. August 18th is the day.
August 18th.
Right on. How can people help? How can they volunteer? What do you need?
We are looking for people to come out, starting even right now. I just got back from an event outdoors right now. Is anybody who's local or wants to participate? We have so much work to do on the ground, and before August 3rd even starts, which is the early voting day, August 3rd through August 16th. And before that, anybody around the country, we're looking for people to help phone bank for us, because the one way that we really win on progressive ideas is by expanding the electorate. And we have the amount of people, registered Democrats who don't vote, or registered Democrats and people with mail-in ballots that don't send in their ballots. And we need that extra push. We need that extra phone call to say, hey, you can go early vote. It's right. You can go to any early voting station. You can get, if you go ahead and just send that ballot in, you can make a huge difference in climate change if we get enough of these progressive members in. So that's my last message. If you go to voteguido.com, all the forms are there, and I'm really happy to talk to you. I call every volunteer myself and say thank you, and what can I do to make your time better with our campaign?
Right on. And she's an incumbent for how many years? It's like 30 years?
Incumbent in this seat for 8 years, in some elected position in Florida, South Florida, for 33, 34 years. So from the Florida, maxed out at the Florida House, went to mayor, did 2 terms of mayor, attempted to get a 3rd term in as a mayor, and has criticized Trump for trying to do that, but attempted to change the entire charter of the West Palm Beach to try to get another term. That's not a very commendable thing and then had to go to Congress, had to. And then also turned down a radio station, made sure there wasn't much criticism of her while she was the mayor. It's just, we need change here in Palm Beach County, especially, this district and the districts around us.
Yeah, right on. And I think when I pulled up that slide, it was a D+9 district, right? So it's, why would you not want the fightingest fighter, right? Uncorrupt fighting for you, right? That's the way I see it. So
I agree.
Awesome. So voteguido.com, August 18th. Send some bucks his way. If you can phone bank and send some texts, please sign up and volunteer. Guido, I thank you for taking the time to chat with me, and thanks for your service, and thanks for running.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate it, and thank you for having me on the show. Really, really have enjoyed this and been looking forward to it.
Right on. One last plug: the Fantastic Four, the other 4, and the other guy.
Yes, please. We're calling them now the Flowgressives. We have every district from here to Miami-Dade, minus Ted Deutsch. There's nobody running in that primary. We have myself, Sheila Sherliffus McCormick, Jen Perlman, and Christine Olivo running all non-corporate. We are all upholding the ideas of Green New Deal, Medicare for all, and others that the progressives are no corporate finance. We need people to come out and support the Florida Fab Four. It is, I think, historic for a consecutive block of people in a Democratic primary to form a group, because we're going against. None of us have even combined, none of us have the funding that even a single one of these incumbents has.
Yeah.
So it's really And all of us combined have had the exact same experience. The incumbent party, the Democratic Establishment Party, saying, I don't want anything to do with you. We're going to pretend you don't exist and hope this election just blows by. So we've united as a group. I think that if we got all 4 of us in office, it would change the direction of South Florida and the country and this country, because it would be 4 more progressive candidates. So as we say with the Florida Fab Four, if you can't vote for me, vote for Sheila. If you can't vote for Sheila, vote for Jen. If you can't vote for Jen, vote for Christina Olivo.
Right on. Cool. Well, Godspeed, Guido. Thanks for taking the time to chat. And I will talk to you once you're elected, my friend.
Thank you so much, Eric. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.